Yo, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. This episode, we're going to start to dive into indoor cultivation. I recently started just a few plants indoors, and I've definitely already made a ton of mistakes. So the goal of this episode is for you not to make the same mistakes that I have and discuss why some of these things just haven't worked out. We're also going to talk about the dry and cure and everything in between. But before we get started on this week's episode, I have a huge favor to ask all of you. If you are a home grower or you want to be a home grower but haven't had the ability to grow yet, please take the 5 to 7 minute survey that's linked in the show notes of this episode. The goal of the survey is to understand why people grow, any challenges, advantages, spiritual connection, and everything in between when it comes to home grow. So big thanks to anyone who's already taken the survey, and I'll make sure to share the data back with you once the survey is complete at the end of the year so that you can be an advocate for home grow as well. All right, so grab a warm cup of tea, give your pup a boop on the nose, and just chill with Jordan and I for the next hour or so. All right, welcome back to the Bioactive Podcast. Today I have a guest who's been on before and taught us all a ton of information. So I'm so excited to have Jordan River back from Growcast, which is an amazing podcast and a community. If you are all about growing, you need to join this community. I've learned a lot from him, and he does one-on-one teachings and all of the fun stuff. And today we're going to answer some Patreon questions and also talk about some of my recent mistakes and lessons learned in my indoor grow. So welcome back to the show, Jordan.
Hey, thank you so much, Riley. It's great to be here. I appreciate you having me on the program again.
Oh yeah, I really wanted to talk to you. We were like messaging on Instagram, and it's like, okay, let's just have this conversation. So, I mean, you are a very talented indoor grower, and you've helped a lot of people grow indoors. I had only grown outdoors until this year, so this was my first time ever growing inside, and I made a mistake, literally step one, and I started my plants outside for a few weeks, and then I went to move them inside, and everyone's like, you're not supposed to do that. You're introducing all kinds of, harmful fungi and bacteria, and you're stunting your plants. Can we talk about that first?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, is that crazy to transition like that?
I would love to talk about grow foibles, and really, here's the thing. We support all types of growing, and the fact is there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. There are so many different things you can do in a grow, and people have success with all different methods. That being said, taking plants from inside to outside, back and forth, vice versa, that's a pretty advanced tactic, I would say. Okay. It's definitely doable, but there are a lot of things out there in nature that would love to get into your indoor grow and take over, because in nature, there's all these things that are trying to kill your plant. But then there's also all these things that are kind of there to kill the things that are killing your plant. They're there to help your plant, and there's a whole balance. But indoors, if you introduce a pest into your grow tent that's just sitting in the basement, that's like the Garden of Eden to the pests. They're like, oh my God, it's just an unprotected food source, right?
And you're not giving room for the next arsenal of things to come in and fight those things, like what you're talking about. It's like you're only bringing in things and you're not bringing in more things to help with that.
So by breaking that barrier, you're definitely running a risk. That being said, there are ways to do it.
Okay.
But that's probably not how I would have recommended if you're a first-time indoor gardener. We have our first-time growers guide. It's growcast.com/guide. It's totally free. We actually just updated it. Like I said, we help growers of all kinds, from DWC and cocoa to outdoor living soil and everything. But our beginner's grow guide, we really think we simplified it into the easiest. Ease is really what we were focused on with this guide, and it's an indoor system, it's an organic soil system, and it's a sub-irrigated planter, which just means that you don't have to worry about overwatering, and it works really, really well. So Yeah.
And I want to ask you questions about watering too, because again, like I have talked about indoor growing, but I'm certainly not an expert in it. Mm-hmm. And my brain was like, I want these plants to experience sunlight and wind and like all these beautiful things outside. Like I want them to have that outdoor experience, and then I can just bring them in when it gets too cold. But I think part of my mistake was it was already getting a little bit cold. So it was like kind of going from that relatively harsh for a seedling outdoor environment environment, and then I was bringing it into like the warm, cushy, beautiful environment, and then doing that like back and forth.
That's exactly right. And plants like consistency. One thing I'd like to say to all the gardeners out there, we do not give enough credit when it comes to the cultivation community to just consistency. We're always looking for that one thing to tweak or that one thing to change or whatever it is. Really, a lot of your job as a good gardener, a great gardener, is going full observation mode, as one of my members said. It's taking your hands off, keeping things really, really consistent, and not changing things around, letting the plants adapt to your environment.
Yeah, so I think next time, which is relatively soon because I'm growing autoflowers, I'm going to obviously start it inside, and I'm going to see how that experience is different from this whole like outdoor indoor thing, because I'm like, man, I just started with way too many factors at play.
Yeah.
I need to really simplify
And you're
this.
trying to learn two different methods, right? Like outdoor growing is fantastic. It's easy in a lot of ways, but it's also hard in a lot of ways. And so to mix the two is really where you're kind of setting yourself for a battle on two fronts, if you will.
Yeah, and like I thought it was going to be easier doing that. It was actually way more difficult to do the whole like remembering to bring in your plants and like like
Right.
I wouldn't recommend that. So don't do that for your like first indoor grow.
Yeah.
I also just realized for the YouTube watchers that this frame is crooked, and that's probably going to drive some people crazy, but I'm just going to keep it there cuz it's already there.
Oh, nice. Yeah, adds a little bit of character to it.
A little pizzazz.
Yeah, totally.
So we don't need to go through your whole indoor growing guide, but I would like just some tips and tricks in general, keeping it simple. I have a very small tent at home. I believe it's 4x4, 4 feet by 4 feet. So I'm really only growing like one plant at a time. But even talking about things like what size tents should we consider? Is it just number of plants? Are there other things that we need to look into? Airflow, watering, and light timers. These are all things I want to kind of pick your brain about.
Absolutely. And like I said, there's a lot of ways to get started. One of the difficult parts about indoor growing is deciding what you're going to do. Getting the right equipment, deciding which style you're going to go with. And that's what we really wanted to conquer with the Grow Guide and make it super, super simple for people. So like I said, I recommend all styles, but if you don't know where to begin, just follow this guide. And really, there's a lot of companies out there that make it incredibly easy to get started. We're big fans of AC Infinity over at Growcast. And one of the reasons is because they sell grow tent kits that are just everything you need. Everything you need is there. Like you said, the fans, the filters, the stuff for taking air in and out of the tent, the stuff for moving the air within the tent, the lights,
Do
the
they
pots.
come with lights as well?
They come with lights. They come with everything you need to get started. And the Grow Guide gives you like 3 options, right? So the first option is, and there's many different ones, but we think these 3 are the best to get started with. The first is a 2x2, which is really, really small, but you can still get a good amount of bud out of a 2x2. And you're really going to only be putting one plant in that 2x2.
Okay.
And then we have a 2x4, which is the perfect size for an earth box planter. That's the style of planter I said before. And that would have 2 plants in there. And that 2x4 is a great size. I mean, you can pull a pound out of a 2x4. If you follow the guide and you have good genetics that yield, you can get a pound out of a 2x4. And then the 4x4 is our bigger one. And in a 4x4, you should be able to get away with quite a few plants. Now, the thing about how many plants should I grow is really a bit of a red herring question. Like new growers will say, how many plants should I put in this tent? Really what you're trying to do is fill the canopy space. So you can put one plant in a 4x4, no problem. The thing is, your vegetative time is going to be longer because you need this plant to grow to fill all of that space, that canopy, and then you flip it into flower, right? If you have 2 plants in there, theoretically, if you grow them the same way, your vegetative time should be about cut in half. The more plants you have, the shorter of a vegetative cycle you need to achieve a full canopy. What you want is basically leaves and bud sites and eventually flowers wall to wall. Not too crowded, but wall to wall so that no light is being wasted put down onto those plants. So I hope that makes sense. It's a question I get all the time and there's no easy answer for it. How many plants should I grow? That's up to you. It's just the more you have, the faster your veg cycle is going to be. So I recommend 2 plants per earth box. Each earth box takes up a 2x4 space, and it just makes things super, super simple for first timers. So that's what we recommend.
That's a great recommendation. I have also seen so much talk about under canopy lighting in the cannabis space. If you are only growing one plant in, say, a 4x4 grow tent, Do the shiny sides of that grow tent, are you getting some under canopy lighting from the bounce, the refracting of the light? Is that beneficial maybe to have a little extra space for diffraction?
Well, it's interesting you say that because yes, those walls are highly reflective, like high 90 percentage reflective. So the
It's
light
so
in
bright
that
in there.
tent,
It's
really people
crazy.
overlight their plants a lot of the time, Riley. When I'm dealing with, every single day in our member Discord, I'm literally like holding growers' hands and walking them through and healing their sick plants. Like that's what we do in the Plant Problems channel. Shout out to Mary Beth Sanchez, taught me almost everything I know. But I swear to God, a quarter of the problems that I see in veg are just your light is too strong. All these light manufacturers are really, really good at making powerful LEDs. And they're like, well, I have it set at 60% or 50%. And I'm like, you got to turn that thing down to 20% because it's this tiny
Really?
little plant that's just being pounded with this big grow light. That's going to be their final grow light. That thing is going to power a whole bloom run. The little tiny plants really don't like being oversaturated with light. So that's something that I see growers make a mistake with a lot. Now, under canopy lighting is interesting because that also depends on your plant size. So your light penetrates your canopy. We talk about that canopy of growth, right? And then you've got your grow light hanging above it. Your grow light penetrates that canopy a couple feet, like 2 to 3 feet deep. Anything below that, you should really be shaving off because it's not getting any light. But if you stick bars of light under there facing upward, you can leave all that undergrowth and it will chunk up. So there are some grows where under canopy lighting is not going to do anything because it's all removed. And then there's other grows where they intentionally leave more bud sites and then light them. And it does work. It does chunk up your lower buds. I don't do it personally, but I think it's feasible in a lot of setups.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so you don't move your light throughout your grow indoors, right? You're just keeping it mainly in the same place, whether you just planted that seed or whether you're getting ready for harvest?
It's good to keep it an equal distance off the plants as they grow. However, in my 4x5, I keep my Photon Tech strapped to the top of it. I don't put seedlings in there because here's the thing, Riley. Your light fixture produces light, but it also produces heat. And these LED fixtures have become so efficient that now people's grow tents are cold. And they've got this big LED light all the way up at the ceiling, and the fan's pulling out all the heat, and then all the way down on the floor, they've got this itty bitty little seedling sitting on the cold concrete underneath the tent. And this plant is just freezing. Yeah. So what you need to do, what I really recommend people do, is have a separate seedling and early veg light. Don't try to take this massive 720 watt LED that you have and turn it down to 5% to light this. Get a little nice 40 watt fixture and put that right on top of that young plant because that's going to allow it to warm up. And heat is so important for transpiration. We're going to talk a lot about heat in this episode, but it's so important to keep those seedlings warm because otherwise they're cold and they're overlit. And that's a bad combo for seedling health.
And they get kind of like fried, like their leaves look fried, or they just don't
They
grow
stop
well.
transpiring, so they start to droop. The high light intensity drives photosynthesis. So you're punishing them with light, and they're trying to get more minerals to keep up, but they're so small, and their root system is so small, and they're so cold that their transpiration is inhibited. Think of your plant as a pump. Your plant sits in its medium, and there's water in the medium, and all the plant is doing is just pumping that water through into water vapor. It's taking in CO2 and taking in light and putting out oxygen and all these things. But what it's really doing, like as far as the happiness of the plant, is it's pumping water out of the soil into the air. And the warmer it is, the better that pump is going to work. And the colder it is, the slower that pump is going to work. So there's just different things that affect how fast and how hard your plant works as a pump.
I love that analogy. And when I'm growing outdoors, I will start my seeds when I start my regular vegetable seeds, or at least like a loofah, which takes a really long time to grow. So I'll start them around the same time. And I always use a heat map when I'm starting those heat mat when I'm starting those seeds. Is that something you recommend for any seeds that you're starting, or do you not use heat mats?
It's all dependent. I do like heat mats, especially modern heat mats. Back in the day, Riley, like, how many years ago is that? I'm old now, but 10, 15 years ago, growing in Humboldt County, heat mats used to come with no dial, and they would just cook the S out of your plants. They're way too hot. Now, again, I get my AC Infinity heat mat. It's got this high-low dial. I keep mine all the way on low because you really can dry out your stuff too fast and cook them. But yes, absolutely. I grow down here in the basement in the biodome, and it gets very, very cold in here. So I need to keep the plant warm however I can. If I can't get that light down on the foliage, at least can we make up for it by warming up the root zone, or at least not adding to the coldness by having a cold root zone. Very important.
Cool. Love that. Do you monitor the temperature inside your tent? Like, do you have something that monitors that? And where's your sweet spot for where you're aiming to keep the inside of the tent at?
Oh boy, you're about to bring out old man VPD Jordan. That's what they call me in Growcast membership, old man VPD, because people nerd out about their climate control. Like they really, really go deep with climate control. So much so that I think it's a little bit excessive and maybe a little bit of a red herring, like I said before. So yes, I do monitor my temperature and I monitor my humidity, but I think people are way too concerned about metrics like VPD, vapor pressure deficit, which is just simply a metric of how thirsty the air is. It's a relationship between your temperature and your humidity, and that determines how thirsty the air is. But I think that there's way more important metrics. First of all, you need airflow. Airflow is the most important thing. You shouldn't be sacrificing airflow, turning your fans on and off or up or down to match vapor pressure deficit. That's crazy. Plants need to breathe first and foremost. Without that, they're never going to transpire well. They're never going to be happy. Second is temperature. When it comes to like actual metrics, temperature is king. If your plant is too cold, it's going to be droopy and it's not going to take up minerals properly. It's not going to transpire properly. If it's too hot, it's going to stretch out. It's going to get lanky and it'll straight up cook your buds if it gets too hot. So indoors under LED lighting, that's a very important distinction. Most people are under LED, about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Anywhere from 76, my cold basement, sometimes I'm running at 75, 76. Okay, we're okay there. All the way up to like 85 Fahrenheit, which is nice.
Wow. I mean, it makes sense, like the cannabis plant from where it's grown typically, but like in my head, I think my plants are cold. Now you're making me think that my plants are cold.
I've been helping growers for 15 years, and it went from them always being too hot because of the old school gas style bulbs that would roast your tent up to 90 degrees. And now the LEDs have gotten so good that everybody's plants are cold. You really want to run it warmer. Think of it this way, Riley. The plants are sitting in there trying to breathe and grow and stretch and do all the things we do. They do not have any clothes on.
Right.
Okay?
They're
imagine just sitting, going into your grow tent in the basement, taking off all your clothes and just sitting on the concrete floor under that light. Is it going to be
Maybe that's
warm?
what I'll do. I won't get any sort of like measurement tool. I'm just going to do that once a week and see if it's still comfortable.
Well, listen, that's the secret at Growcast, okay? You don't need all those fancy tools. But no, seriously, it should feel like a warm day at the beach. I'm a big fan of the arm test. I know this is crazy, but when people are like, I got to dial in my VPD metrics, I'm just like, hey, stick your arm, roll up your sleeve, stick your arm under the light, right where the plants are on the canopy. Does it feel like a nice warm day at the beach? Would you like to be sunning yourself in your underwear under this temperature? If not, they're probably not happy. So you want them warm. You really do. And you want them consistent. And most people are over lighting and over cooling their plants.
So what is your method of maintaining that temperature? Like, is there just something that does it automatically, or are you adjusting like a heat mat like we're talking about? And,
you adjust
and
the
how are you
fans.
monitoring it in general? Like, I'm picturing like a baby monitor, but for your plants.
You can get a portable temperature, like a thermometer. It's very easy, but most lights come with them. My Photon Tech has a little probe that hangs, and I hang it right in the canopy, and I want it to be about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take 5 degrees, really. And I want it to be consistent. So the way you control it is by increasing or lowering your exhaust fan. So I've got some really good tricks for cold grows because your light produces all that heat, right? The higher your exhaust fan is running, the more it's pulling that heat out. Now that's important for fresh air, like I said, but you can increase the exhaust to pull out more heat and make it colder in the tent, or you can lower your exhaust strength to hold that heat in more effectively. Now, here's a crazy one, Riley. I don't hear a lot of people talk about this. I'll drop this on your show for the indoor growers. Almost everybody hangs their exhaust fans at the top of the tent because historically that's what we wanted to do, is get the heat out. Remember I said those old school gas bulbs?
So
that's where everybody's is, because back in the day your HID would get so hot, you got to get that out of here. Now people don't understand your plant is already too cold, and one of the easiest solutions to plants that are too cold is to simply reverse your intake and your outtake. Take your exhaust fan and put it on the floor, pumping air out, and take your intake fan and put it up high. And what that's going to do is it's going to pull air from outside, pull the the warm air from your light down, hopefully across your plants who need it, and then out the exhaust. Second thing you can do is take a little clip fan, like the ones that keep the air moving, clip it to the top of the ceiling of the tent, pointing straight down. That's going to blow that warm air. I have both those things going right now in my basement. The air comes in the top, and then the fan blows the warm air from the light down onto the plants. It's a nice hack that might totally change your grow. Because what you don't want to do is run a heater. Sometimes I got to run a heater.
That's where it was in my brain. Like, is this a space heater? That would be crazy.
Yeah, it's just a lot of money to run a space heater all the time. When it gets really cold in my basement, I'll bust one out. I'll put it by the intake fan. Like, so
it's just bringing in the warm air.
Yeah, but I try not to. That's the worst case scenario is to pay the electricity to have a heater. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
So, that's heat. Now, watering. I know you're big on not overwatering, and we've talked about this before, but I'm a little bit, I don't know why it's harder for me to gauge these indoor plants compared to outside, where it's like so easy, because if my garden's thirsty, my plants are thirsty. Like, everything's thirsty at the same time, and everything's not thirsty after rain. So when I'm looking down at my plants, I'm like, okay, they're a little dry, but I know like weed likes to be a little dry. So are you just on like a schedule, or is there a way that you're monitoring when your plants need more water?
Oh my gosh, it is really the most important skill if you're hand watering in gardening. Like, it is so hard to master watering. It takes a lifetime, literally, Riley, to master watering. And I am no master by any means. I instead like to look for systems that just eliminate over and underwatering entirely. So to answer your question, a few tips. First of all, if you're just at home and you're watering pots and you need help with that, try not going by the moisture, like sticking your finger in the soil to see if it's wet, for instance. Instead, go by the weight of the pot.
Interesting.
Put the new soil in the pot, pot it, and then feel what that feels like. That mostly dry, just fresh out of the bag, could use some water weight of that pot. It is way easier to tell weight than to try to determine how wet the thing is. Then you water it and you feel that difference. It's so much heavier with all that water weight. And then get used to those two weights, and that'll really, you can pick them up. And some people get so adept at it, Riley, they just nudge them with their foot. I see these growers like Farmer John who've just been growing forever and growing amazing. And they'll just walk over and they'll just give it a little kick. And they know just by the feeling of kicking it how much weight is in it. And so there you go. There's a little hand water tip. I like to get a little more scientific with my hand watering. I invested in a Blue Mat moisture meter. And this is going to tell you, this is actually not going to tell you moisture either. What it does, Riley, is it tells you the pressure in the soil.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it measures in M bars. I'm sure you're probably familiar with that for like other stuff, right? Yeah, it's like a measurement of pressure, and you want to go within a certain M bar range. It's about 100 millibars. The more you water, the lower that number goes, and when it gets down to, you don't want it to get below like 60, and then as it dries, that number climbs back up, and at about 120, you water again. So invest in a Blue Mat moisture meter. Get one that reads in M bars. That'll really help. And then the final boss is how I'm growing. Again, it's called a sub-irrigated planter. And what that means is the soil sits on top of a reservoir. So there's an empty reservoir at the bottom of this container, and then there's like a little grate, and then the soil sits on top of that grate. And to get water down into that reservoir, you just pour it down a tube. You don't need to water the soil surface ever, really. You just pour water down the tube, and the water wicks up from the bottom until it's dry. And then you refill the tube. There's no overwatering. There's no underwatering. You just fill the tube, and when it's empty, you refill it. Is that how
you put nutrients in your plants too? Is just filling that reservoir?
It's a soil style grow at this point. So I don't use a lot of bottled nutrients. I use them very sparingly, because with bottles, you need some sort of runoff. You don't want those bottles to build up in the medium, because you get nutrient buildup. You need it to be flowing out of the system. In a living soil system, in my SIP, there is no runoff. It's an enclosed reservoir. So when I want to add nutrients, what I do is I top dress with like compost and dry amendments, and I work that down into the soil, and the microbes get after that from underneath.
Oh, and you have such a healthy ecosystem. You don't have to worry about like any sort of bacteria or fungi like getting out of hand
I mean,
indoors.
if you're using beneficial microbes like every watering like I do, you're going to protect
Every
yourself.
watering. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it's always a threat, right? Like these pathogens are all around us all the time. Every breath we take has botrytis and aspergillus and all these things. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I still run into pathogen problems, and I still need to attack it with something like trichoderma to eliminate that pathogen. Maybe a couple times a year I'll see some of that pathogen damage, but nothing we can't fix at Growcast membership.
I was going to ask that, like, if you do see some sort of mold, and I guess the mold I'm talking about would be more like if it's on the soil versus on the plant.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a point of no return of being like, ooh, that's pretty gnarly, I don't want to smoke that anymore?
Well, if you grow, especially if you use things like bokashi like I do, but really in any living soil system, you are likely to see some blooms on your soil, and that's a good thing. Those are decomposers that are breaking down that organic material and solubilizing minerals, nutrients. That's how the whole living soil system works. So don't be alarmed when you see soil mites in your living soil. People freak out when they see bugs running around. It's like, hey, that thing's zooming around and running around in your soil. It's not harming your plant. Plant pests,
the living part of living soil.
Exactly, and they don't like that living part, Plant pests hang out on the plant. Like that's when you should be worried, is when they're just on your plant, not when they're running around your soil. He's doing other work. So yes, you might see some blooms, you might see some insects in there, and I just like to cover your soil because, like you said, you don't want anything transferring from the soil surface to your especially finished buds. And that can happen, like 100% can happen. So I like to have either a mulch or a tarp, like a soil tarp over my earth box. Keeps it very, very clean. People like that.
Ooh, that makes a lot of sense. And clean and dirty at the same time. That's a good thing.
You take off, exactly, underneath the sheets. You get under the sheets and then we play dirty. But then, when your significant other is coming around, you don't want them seeing worms crawling out of you. You just cover that up with a tarp. We don't talk about the worms in the basement. You know what I mean?
When you mentioned earlier setting your light to like 60% or 20% or whatever that is. Do you use a light timer if you're going like 12-12, if you're doing other like whatever stage you're in? Are you using like a timer that you'd use for any other plant, or using a specific cannabis timer or anything specific for that?
It's still one of the few things that like new growers, when you tell them, okay, you're going to have to change the light cycle.
Yeah.
They don't like that. They're like that. That's one of the parts that's almost a non-starter for a lot of new growers. And most lights, like the grow light that I use, my Photon Tech, has a timer with it. So you can set it within that. But you can also just go buy an outlet timer for any appliance.
That's what I bought, an outlet
That's
timer.
what you should buy, because especially the manual outlet timers, they never fail you. These digital
that's when I
ones,
bought. I had an electric one and it failed me, and I was like, there has to be a simpler one.
Let me get you in the Discord server, okay? Because I would have called you out on that. I don't trust those electric timers. If you're using one and it works, God bless you. I like the manual ones where you push down the levers of the time. It's like it can't go wrong. So
I still had to watch a YouTube video on how to actually use the manual timer. I didn't know it like clicked down, but I figured it out.
Of course, yeah, 100%. So yeah, you need to be able to control the light cycle. That's very, very important. Understanding the relationship between how strong your light is, how long it's on, and then that total light saturation for the day, known as DLI or daily light integral. That's all really important. But suffice it to say, you don't want to overlight your plants. They're all so powerful now. It was like this space race to make the most powerful light, and they're not wanting for light anymore. If you have a modern LED fixture, I promise you that.
Good to know.
Yeah,
definitely good to know. Are there other considerations for someone who's grown outdoor who wants to grow indoor where it's different? Because, I thought it was going to be a very seamless transition. Not that seamless of a transition. They're actually completely different worlds. So is there anything else that you can think of that people need to think about for growing indoor versus outdoor, even if it's like different genetics? I know we talked about like lights and soil and all these different things, but like what other things should we be considering if we want to make the switch?
Oh, I could probably do a whole episode on this with you, Riley, and I would. But to boil it down, it is a really different game. You mentioned genetics. I mean, you can grow anything in a grow tent. You are the master of your domain in the grow tent. You're there controlling every little aspect. And outdoors, it is totally different. That's why people like to find something that works for their area outdoors, because you ain't lowering that temperature. You ain't raising that humidity. It is what it is. So if you're in the dry Arizona climate, you better have some hardy genetics that has a lineage that's used to and adapted to that high light intensity, that low humidity, drought stress. Things like that really are embedded in the genetic code, and that's where people hunt. They pheno hunt because they need to. Indoor growers pheno hunt because they want a certain taste out of their flower. Outdoor growers pheno hunt because they want something that survives the challenges that they face in their ecosystem. But I will say, one of the best ways to grow, shout out to my buddy OK Calix. He's an awesome educator. We do classes together. One of the best ways to grow is outdoors, in-ground, natural farming. So you're growing these big, huge plants with massive yield right out of the ground. You're only using natural inputs from your own property. It's basically free at that point. And then he takes these huge plants, harvests all of them, washes the buds nice and clean, and then processes everything into solventless hash rosin.
Hell yeah.
And
That's
it's just
a great idea.
You just end up with this huge yield for basically for free. The sun is free. The nutrients were free. He breeds his own genetics.
Smokability doesn't really matter because as long as you got good trichomes and good chemistry being produced, like, you know, it doesn't need to be perfect there. And you mentioned washing buds, though, and I need to ask you about this because I recently saw an Instagram where somebody was dunking the buds. Yeah. I have never washed my buds. Why should we wash our buds? Why should we not? What is it doing?
Such a touchy subject, man. Listen, it's funny because at Growcast, like I said, I will help any style of grower. I'll smoke with any style of grower. We really take all types, but people get touchy over the bud washing subject. Here's what I'll say. I don't wash my buds either, but I've been converted by a lot of people in my membership, which is if you grow outdoors and you understand some of the environmental challenges that these growers face, you know, in SoCal, some of the or in the valley, some of the red dirt that gets kicked up and kicked all over your plants. When you bud wash those plants, you can see at the bottom of the bucket all of this gnarly stuff that comes off. And I will say, if you're using a product like the Amazing Dr. Zymes, it surprisingly does not harm trichome quality as much as I would nearly have expected. So I support it.
I didn't know people were using a product. That might be really stupid. I thought it was a bucket of water that people were dunking.
You can, and you will see some come off. Some people use lemon and baking soda, which I feel is a little bit harsh. Okay. And some people use a product called the Amazing Dr. Zymes. Not a sponsor, but an awesome product. And if I was going to wash my buds, I would use the Amazing Dr. Zymes. Just try it. I think people are scared to try it and actually like what they see. But for an environment where your outdoor bud is very, very dirty or dusty or insect poop or anything like that, great choice. You got to try it.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I would. I guess I was going to ask what the concern was, but it makes sense it being like this dust and insect. I mean, I would say I've smoked like a million bugs in my life, and that's fine. But I see if you're in a certain area, that might not be a great thing.
You can see a lot come off in the buckets, and it makes you want to do it. People don't want to wash because they think it'll harm their trichomes and their content, but that plant gets rained on all the time. You'd be surprised how little it harms it. So that's my bud washing take. Don't crucify me in the comments.
I love it. Is some of the concern that maybe your plant would be too wet for the dry and cure, like that you're introducing too much moisture at the very end, or?
Absolutely, especially, I mean, and we can get into this, especially if you already are in a damp climate and you know you're going to have a tough time getting that dry. However, that's why I like a product like the Amazing Dr. Zymes, because it naturally kills mold and mildew. So you don't have to worry about that. It's actually going to battle that back for you a little bit.
Makes sense.
And it does much better than you'd expect for dunking these buds, essentially soaking them before harvest, like you said. It's not something I do, but I've definitely been converted by some great members. Shout out to the Rugged Gent who converted me on bud washing.
So I definitely want to learn a little more about the dry and cure from you.
Yeah.
For indoor plants, after you cut them, do you dry and cure them in the tent? Is that also a silly question, or?
No, absolutely not. You can dry and cure your plants anywhere. I really recommend doing it in a grow tent just so you can contain it. I mean, you'll stink up your house, but more importantly, you'll stink up your neighborhood block. It was interesting living in Eureka in Humboldt County. I lived there for 5 years, and I mean, you'd turn the corner of the street and you knew it was harvest time at somebody's house. You get hit in the face Just like, whoa, you thought these plants stank when they were growing. Just wait till you're in dry and cure. So I like to get into an enclosed space like another grow tent. You can use dry baskets. That's another way to kind of keep it contained, and get a carbon filter going so that all your neighbors around town don't, report you for smelling like a skunk. There's a dead skunk in Riley's yard. I can smell it.
That would actually be kind of on brand for where we live and what we do. So that's funny.
So everybody, traditionally, historically, people dried outside, which is not a great place to dry. You're exposed to the elements and the sun and things like that. And then, in our modern cannabis history in America in the later 1900s, everybody was driven inside growing. That's why everybody started growing inside in the first place. And therefore, you're also drying and processing inside for anonymity purposes or stealth purposes or whatever. But also now we can control the environment, right? Now we can decide at what temperature our plants dry and that sort of thing. And the prevailing wisdom, maybe you've heard this, Riley, is basically a slow and low style. A lot of people say a 60-60 dry style, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 60% humidity, which is quite cold and quite wet, a little bit wet. And the intention is slow and low to preserve terpenes, like you're preserving anything, right? The idea with preservation.
Because when it's warmer, things just evaporate easier.
Exactly. Less volatilization is our friend here, right? Which I agree with. I agree with that slow and low style. The problem with 60-60 is twofold. One, it's hard for your average person to achieve. It's like not easy to get a 60-60 dry tent unless you have like AC hooked up and all this stuff, right? And two, even if you do get to true 60-60, sometimes you get locked into this long, never-ending dry phase that lasts weeks or even months. I call it drying stun lock. And that's not good for your end product either, because it doesn't turn out good when it will never finish drying. It's wet forever. So the big problem with 60-60 is it ignores a bunch of other metrics that are super, super important.
The big problem is it kind of sucks.
Well, it ignores other things that are imperative, in my opinion, to get it right. But I do think it's a good starting point. What I recommend is to just try to get as close as you can reasonably.
That's
fair. If you can get to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, or even like 68 degrees Fahrenheit, anything under 70, you're most of the way there. 70 degrees, I feel, is where a lot of those more volatile terpenes start to gas off more. And so just get it as close as you can to that 65 mark. And then for humidity, 50 to 55% RH is fine. In most cases, that's going to be absolutely fine. And you can still go slow and low, but avoid that 60-60 moisture stun lock, if that makes sense.
You made me think of something like when you mentioned drying, curing outside, which, we know that's been done in many different cultures, but you wonder, because growing plants outside produces such unique chemistry, like sun-grown outdoor chemistry, if that would also, like if you sun-dried, if that would change the chemistry in unique ways too, because it's constantly being exposed to the sun.
It would have to. And
right?
Last time I traveled to Jamaica, the guy told me, we sell the green stuff to you tourists. All the stuff we smoke is brown because it's sun-dried, and it gets you way more fucked up. That's what he told me.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, no kidding, man. I just could not imagine drying my weed in the sun. Maybe I just need to expand my horizons, because that's literally what the guy said. He's like, the brown shit is the shit, is what he told me. Sorry, I'm swearing. Shouldn't be swearing.
No, it's totally fine. Now that's I want to study that. I think that would be really, really interesting. But that's side note. So you mentioned the two most important drying metrics are relative humidity and temperature for drying and cure. You mentioned earlier you smoke wet bud to kind of test it. I have not had very good luck with that, with actually smoking it, but I actually did put some in my dry herb vaporizer, and that was an interesting experience, because it was so fresh, and actually knew my plant was not done yet, because it was like the flavor had not developed. And I thought that was kind of a cool thing to try.
Well, hold on, I want to be clear. I don't recommend you smoke wet bud. It's got to at least be dry enough to burn, because you're right, sometimes you put a bud in that bong and you take a lighter to it and it doesn't even change color.
Yeah, and then you're like, okay, this is too much butane.
It's just steamed hams at that point. So as soon as it's breakupable and grindable too, then it'll burn down. A lot of people like the snap test, but I got to tell you, Riley, I like the peel test better. Okay, you ready for the peel test? It's
Yeah.
really simple. Everybody here already knows what the peel test is. They just don't know it yet. You've got your stick of bud, right? And you've got the big top cola up top and then these little side buds all the way down it. If you're holding it upright and you grab a side bud and you go to break it off, what happens when it's too wet?
Oh, like it rips down the
you
side.
Get this
You
big
get that little
peel.
stretch.
You get this big
Yeah.
banana string peel.
Yeah.
That is way more indicative of how dry, especially that flower is that you picked, than trying to snap the main stem like at 4 different parts and say, is it snapping? Just pick it off. And it should either have no peel and just snap right off, although sometimes that can be too dry, or it should just be just barely a little bit of meat coming off there. If you get a 1/2 inch wide strip all the way down, that thing needs more time drying. So the snap test can be a little misleading. I like the peel test.
And I love that you said the grinder test too, because I was humbled this year too. I was like, oh, I'm gonna try to smoke this. Put it in the grinder or in my flour mill, and it just like smushed it and did nothing. And I was like, all right, cool. Thanks for that.
Exactly.
I think
it just gums
we'll
up your
come
grinder
back.
instantly.
Yeah.
Yep. It's
Very humbling.
Sounds like I'm hitting on some of these subjects.
Love it. Okay, one more question from me, and then we have a bunch of questions from Patreon that I'm excited to get into. Last question for me is I cannot have a grow light in my house and not grow food.
Yeah.
It's just like I need to. So I think I'm going to start growing some lettuce. I was thinking maybe some romaine lettuce, but have you noticed there's any benefits to like co-planting specific flowers even inside a grow tent? Or have you experimented with growing any foods that you found were like relatively easy to grow in your tent?
Oh, it's so funny. Yes, I actually have a whole garden started this year so that we have fresh fruits and we have fresh vegetables all winter long. So it's funny you're bringing this up, and I've got a bunch of good advice. There's one more thing I'd like to touch on dry cure at the end, but let me answer your question here first, which is the plants I recommend growing alongside cannabis are the ones that feed similar, and they're some of the best ones you can grow indoors and have all winter long. Tomatoes, peppers of any kind, bell peppers, hot peppers, sweet peppers, even things like green beans. These are heavy fruiting plants. They put on big, heavy tomatoes, just like our big, heavy flowers, and the feeding is almost identical. It's a ton of calcium, it's a ton of potassium, a bunch of phosphorus, and decent levels of nitrogen. So you can take if you're a bottled nutrient grower, especially if you're not a soil grower, you can take that exact same week 5 weed flower fertilizer and just dump that on your tomatoes, onto your jalapenos, or even onto your green beans, and they're going to do phenomenal. So I like growing those in your grow tent, because there's a lot of plants you don't need a grow tent to grow. Herbs, you can just grow just with a light or on a windowsill. Microgreens, you can grow them anywhere. But if you have this space in your grow tent, utilize it. Either stick an autoflower there or stick a tomato or a pepper there would be my suggestion.
I love that, especially peppers, because they're so prone to pests outside. Like something's always burrowing in your peppers. So I think an indoor tent would be a great place to grow some bell peppers. And they're also just hard to grow in New England because our grow season is often not quite long enough.
Yeah, and I would also say do what works in your environment. So if you have a cold grow, are you in a basement too, or is it just kind of cold?
Basement.
So you're in a basement as well. And what that's going to do is allow you to grow cool climate crops all year round. So you said you wanted to grow lettuce. That's perfect. Lettuce, kale, broccoli, cauliflower, these are all going to do really well in that cool environment, and you'll be able to
cruciferous vegetables.
Yeah, pump out some serious heads of lettuce, and that way you don't got to go to the store anymore. You just walk downstairs, harvest your fresh romaine right out of the tent, and bring it up, and there's nothing quite like it. There's no way to up-level a sandwich better.
Can't wait. Very motivated. Yeah. Do you want to say your thing about dry and cure before
I do.
we go to questions?
I have to, because you said something, and I just have to drill down on it. You said temperature and humidity are the most important factors, which they are, and they're the most talked about. But there are 2 dry and cure factors that I would like to talk about on your show here for the first time outside of membership that I think are almost never discussed and are just as important, if not more important, than temperature and humidity.
Oh my gosh.
You ready? You ready to go? Okay, here we go.
Ready.
The first one people are more familiar with, but they never quantify it, and we're going to work on this. Pre-harvest moisture content. Pre-harvest moisture content is maybe the most important factor for how long your dry is going to take. If you water your plant fresh and then wait a few hours for it to fill up with all that moisture and then chop it, you just extended your dry time by 300%, no matter what environment you're in. Conversely, if you like to dry it out beforehand it's going to be a way easier dry. And instinctively, a lot of people know this, and so they go, I like to drought my plants beforehand. But my question to you would be, what is your pre-harvest water content? Shout out to a Growcast member. His name is Austin Ron, and he takes a wood moisture meter to his plants.
Brilliant.
It is a wood moisture meter. It's got two little prongs. You stick it. We're still trying to decide if it should be set to like hardwood setting, softwood setting. We're working on it, folks. But basically, now you can get a metric. You can stick your plant with this thing, and you can get a metric on your pre-harvest water content. And we're going to work on how pre-harvest water content affects your dry time and what the optimal one is depending on your environment. This is a metric you can balance against your own environment. Super important to understand. If you're in Arizona, again, and you know you're going to have a wicked fast dry that's going to suck everything out, make sure your pre-harvest moisture content is high. Conversely, if you're going into a 60-60 and you want to avoid that stun lock, this is why people get that dry lockout. It's because they go in with a wet plant. Simply drought your plant before putting it into that 60-60, and you're going to have a way better time. So that's my first one.
No, that is so good, because I think you're right. A lot of people know that and do that, but we maybe have never measured it or never like thought of it in a scientific way of like, this is why I do that. So that's fascinating. Yeah. And yeah, the wood meter thing, I think those are relatively cheap too. Mm-hmm. I think it's just like a probe measuring conductivity, right? Like between...
I think that's right. And they're like, you're right. They're like $18 on the internet.
So very affordable.
So we're going to play around with that metric. And again, use that as something to toy with and balance against the pressures you know you're going to face depending on what time of year. And then the second one, and I literally hear no one talking about this, and it's so important, is air turbulence. No one talks about air turbulence in a dry scenario. Again, we all know that we need an oscillating fan moving the buds around, and that's largely just because we don't want any mold spores forming. We want to keep the air.
Right, keep it circulating.
But if you hang up two wet towels in the exact same environment, you're in 60-60, but you got two wet towels, and one you point a fan on low, and another you point a fan on high. Do you think you're going to notice a noticeable difference in the dry time? Of course you are.
Yeah.
Of course you are. It's because air turbulence dries things out way faster. So people are saying, oh, you've got a 60-60, I've got a 60-60, but your pre-harvest moisture content is totally different. And then you've got fans on high drying out your buds 3 times faster than this guy who's barely got his fans going. Air turbulence is another one you can turn up or down. You don't want to turn it too high to where you'll see it warp the trichomes when you look at them under a microscope. But you can toy with that to make your plants dry a little faster or a little slower. So air turbulence considerably contributes to dry time. Those are 2 things I want everyone to be thinking about when they go into their dry and cure phase.
That's so cool. And please write a white paper when you get some data in. I can help you with this, if you want to.
I would need some help. I'm a high school dropout, Riley. Okay,
I think it would be so cool.
If I'm going to write a white paper, I'm going to need some help. And thank you. And that's what I was wondering. I know about CFM and air exchange, but I don't even know what the metric would be to measure air turbulence versus dry time. I just know that I see it all the time when these guys open their tent and it's like a whirlwind in there. You know what I mean?
So cool. And I mean, everyone's talking about the amount of air you put on your plants while you're growing, but nobody's talking about this for the dry and cure of this is just as important.
Exactly. That's exactly right. You don't want to wind burn your plants just like they're living, but you want to get that air moving, and you can control a lot. So I hope that helps. I don't hear almost anybody talking about those 2 metrics, and they're just as important as what you're running your humidity at as far as I'm concerned.
People are going to start talking about it. I'm excited about that. You want to get into some Patreon questions? I think this is kind of perfect because I asked questions before people started growing, and now myself and a bunch of other people are okay, wait, I'm still confused on a few things. So since you're our certified grow expert on this show, we will get into it.
Thank you.
All right. So the first one is from Guy Buttersnaps, and they say, so many videos are for indoor grows, but I would like to know for outdoors, when is it too late to top the plant? I topped my plants once and didn't think about it again until now, and one is super tall. Not sure if I should top again to get more main colas, or if it is already too late. Do I need to check my area's sunlight hours to know when flowering starts, and how long before that would be the window for topping? So this is a question mostly about topping for outdoor plants.
Absolutely, and I can get into this. This actually goes pretty deep, but I'll try to summarize it as best as I can. The reason you top prune your plant or snip the top, essentially decapitate them, is to make them grow out wider. And that's to fill canopy space, right? Now, outdoors, generally you need to top less or not at all. And the reason
Canopy's
that
pretty
is
big.
They grow big and the sun moves around them and hits all sides of them. The difference between a sun and an LED grow light, I cannot explain to you enough, guys. Plants have evolved on this planet to work with the sun, which is an extremely powerful light. We're talking over 2,000 ppfd at its peak, twice what your most powerful grow light is. So how can it handle that direct sunlight, right? Well, the difference is it's a single focal point. It's a small focal point in the sky. The same way you can kind of lift up your thumb and block out the sun, right? It's the same way that plants can angle their leaves to either catch that light, or if they're not feeling it, they can go away from the light, and now those photons are just kind of skipping past like a blade, like past those leaf blades. Now imagine you're in a tent and you're under an LED. That thing takes up the entire ceiling some of the time. I know mine does. And it's just showering light directly
Can't
down
get away
on
from it.
You cannot get it. Doesn't matter how you angle your leaves, you're not getting away from that. So plants are masters at working with the sun, and a cannabis plant gets good light exposure on all sides, essentially, as long as it's not grown between two walls or something, which I've seen before. So what happens is the plant gets huge, man. You say it's big and tall. That's a good thing. That's going to be a big plant. It's going to be huge yield. Now on the other side of that argument, some genetics are naturally more apical dominant. They just grow like a stick, in which case you might want to top it to help branch it out more. But unless that's the case, and unless the ancillary branches are like short and not coming out at all, I would probably just let it do its thing. Top pruning is way more important inside, where you need to fill out that canopy space wide ways, as opposed to outside it's getting light all around. Now, when's the latest you can top it? Once it starts budding, once you start seeing buds, you probably shouldn't top it, even though you totally can in early flower.
Okay.
That's when I would say you want to stop doing, because now it's putting energy towards that bud production, and by lopping it off, you're wasting a little bit of that energy. And that's what I'd say before your buds start. Do I need to check my area's sunlight hours to know when flowering starts? Yes, that's very, very important, and we're going to get into that in another question.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Guy Buttersnaps has a second question.
Mm-hmm.
So my other question is for fertilizing outdoors. I just use the same organic, slow-release granular fertilizer that I use in the rest of my garden. But I've often seen on grow videos, stop feeding their plants so many weeks before harvest to do a flush. Is that just for plants grown with liquid fertilizer? Or should I give my plants their last feeding like a month before harvest?
Yeah, and that's a great question, too. Flushing is more of a bottled nutrient grower move. Bottled nutrients, as I said earlier, build up in the medium, and therefore you need either runoff to push the old stuff out every time, or you need to work in a flush. And at the end, people don't like a bunch of EC, a bunch of electrical conductivity, mineral content, so they flush it out at the end before harvest, which I support. Outdoors, if you're growing in soil or like directly in ground, there is no flushing the earth. That's not how organic soil grows go. They're not drinking up the liquid nutrients, which just they kind of force feed them right up. Instead, they're working with the microbes, which are breaking down the minerals in the soil and exchanging for sugars. The plant puts out sugars, exudates, and the microbes say, thank you for that sugar. Here's some phosphorus. Thank you for that sugar. Here's some whatever mineral they need. And so what happens is with an annual plant that dies at the end of the year, like cannabis, even if it's still in rich soil outdoors, it knows that it's at the end of its life cycle. It stops putting out those exudates, and therefore it starts to fade and kind of flush on its own. It's known as senescence.
I had no idea. That's so fascinating that it just naturally does that.
That's how, and a lot of things tell the plant that it's time to do that, right? Light cycle, as it becomes fall and the days get really short, it's like, okay, I'm going to stop putting temperature as the...
Is this back to transpiration because it's slowing down as the temperature gets cooler?
That's right. It slows down its transpiration as well. The temperature drops, which brings out those fall colors, your purples and your ambers. And these are all the consortium of things that tell the plant it's time to die. Now is the time. You don't need to be taking up more minerals right now. You're going to stop putting out those sugars. Microbes are going to stop giving you minerals, and you're going to senesce and fade. The minerals in the ground are still there. They don't disappear until next year. The plant just knows naturally. Versus bottled nutrients. If you walked out and poured bottles on that thing, that's going to start, it's force fed. It's taken up immediately. It's chelated. It's a bunch of things. So I do like to starve my plants towards the end. It's not a flush, but it's like, hey, we're going to stop feeding you now. And I would get off of that general garden fertilizer. Generally, those are a little too high in nitrogen. I bet you that fertilizer is either, you look at the front of the bag and there's 3 numbers. Those 3 numbers are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And I bet you that bag says 444 or 464. I'd like to see you get on something like something cannabis specific, like a Gaia Green or something. And that first number, that nitrogen, is going to be a 2 instead of a 4. And that's just going to be a little bit better, because you don't need that much nitrogen going that late. I hope we didn't get too in the weeds there, but I would switch to a cannabis specific and not use that higher nitrogen fertilizer.
That's great advice. All right. Thank you. Next question's from Steve. What's the best way for us amateur growers to store our weed? I love this question, Steve. Is it mason jars with the relative humidity packs like Bovida packs, refrigerated? Same question for concentrates like rosin, both home pressed and dispensary purchased. I'm the kind of guy that likes to have a lot of strains on hand to suit my mood, so sometimes I get something and it loses flavor or its dankness, and I'm sure it loses potency as well. No way for me to objectively test this one, LOL, by the time I smoke it again.
We'll just have to settle for subjective testing then. Just more dabs. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And especially rosin and concentrates, they will lose a lot of that dankness, as you put it. And those go right in the fridge. Invest in a mini fridge. Take those rosin in that sealed container. It's really stabilized in there. It's just temperature and dryness that's really going to suck it out. So get that into the refrigerator.
Even the mini fridges. Have you seen them? I think some are like specific for concentrates.
They're like that big, right?
Yeah. I bought one that's I think it's meant for skincare products, which shout out to anyone who's taking care of their skincare products to that degree too. But I have just my little jars in there, and it kind of fits anywhere. Highly recommend.
Mini fridge. I need one of those. My dab
Micro.
game is so weak. I got to get better. But yeah, you can get a fridge. There are devices like the Canatrol, which is a automatic dryer and also a storer, I think.
Yeah, I'm like the world's biggest stan of Canatrol, and I was actually going to say that as the answer to like my answer to this, but I'm like,
well, here's the thing. I
need to stop recommending this machine. It's not, and everyone's like price
range. That's the only thing that. Here's the thing. I was really impressed with how it dries. We've had some competition-winning flower that was dried in a Canatrol, and so I know that. But then, is it also for storing? Here I am, like asking you questions.
No, I store all my flour in my Canatrol. I don't store. I put my concentrates in the mini fridge. I put all my flour in the Canatrol, which is amazing too, because it's like you go dry, cure, store, like all of it in there.
Yeah.
The only thing is, if you already have weed in there and then you harvest weed, you need to take out the previous weed for the dry and cure, and then you can store it all together.
Right, that makes sense. But yeah, I will definitely say that that's a great product. If you can afford it, go grab it. Really do love the Canatrol. You can do mason jars. You're already on it with the humidity packs. I think that those can be useful in a lot of cases, especially when it's really dry. But the company that I'd like to recommend, not a sponsor, they're called Grove Bags.
Oh, yeah.
I
love Grove Bags.
They work really well. I did not expect them to work. I've always been a glass jar guy. When I used to have like more weight, the glass jars didn't make sense. I would toy with all sorts of different types of paper bags and stuff. But the Grove Bag is where it's at. It's basically just a very fancy black, like, I don't know what the material is. It's a plastic-ish material, but they've got a 2-way humidity valve, which really keeps things, long story short, you don't need to burp. Go into Grove Bags instead of your jars. When you're curing in your jars, you have to constantly open the cap and air them out. It's known as burping. Like, you should be doing that like 3 times a day, and it gets exhausting. Grove Bags, I put them in there. You can heat seal them if you want, and I just forget about it. And they cure up so nice. Like, I was blown away at the quality. So I'd say Grove Bags if you can't sprint for the Canatrol.
And you're right, Jordan, like, about volume. Like, Grove Bags are definitely better if you have more, too, because it kind of does get difficult unless you want to use, like, a huge tub or something. But they... Look at that. That's huge.
You get the bigger bags. And there are even bigger ones than this, because otherwise, you're right. You're either doing a ton of jars, which makes no sense, or like the, God, what are they called? Like THC vaults or whatever, like a big ass thing, you know?
Yeah.
So Grove Bag is where it's at, I feel like, for the budget.
Yeah. Love that. All right, cool. This question's from Free Range Mister, and they say, With the exhale CO2 bags, would it be bad for your garden bed to have the turkey tail mushroom right in your bed instead of in the bag with the filter?
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, the exhale bags are the bags that you hang and they grow mushrooms in there. I didn't even realize that it was turkey tail in there to produce more CO2 so your plants are happier. And
I've never heard of this. I was like, I don't know what this question's
really?
asking, but I hope Jordan does.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So when your plant is photosynthesizing, we talked about that transpiration. It's being saturated with light and it's photosynthesizing. It's taking that light and turning it into energy, and it's doing this whole pump process. One of the important factors is CO2. In fact, if you just start pumping your plant full of nutrients and you start turning up the light and you turn it up and you turn it up and you turn it up and you turn it up, eventually the factor that you run into, like why can't we just have our light on 500% and get a zillion pounds per? It's because of CO2. CO2 is the limiting factor. So people raise CO2 through various methods. One of those methods are mushroom bags. And this is another one that's controversial. I've seen people use them to success. I think they work. And what they do is they have these hanging mushroom cultivation bags that are exhaling CO2, raising the CO2 in your tent, supposedly. So, like I said, I've seen some growers that are really, really talented use these and swear by them.
Could you put like a lizard in your grow tent?
Listen, we'll just go full ecosystem. We'll get everything going in there. The problem with growing mushrooms alongside cannabis, it's very difficult because they cross-contaminate a lot of the time. You can grow turkey tail mushrooms in a cannabis soil bed, for instance, but they grow on wood. Right. So you'd want to like inoculate a log and then stick a log in your. It's a little bit much. What I would recommend for Mr. Free Range, Mister,
That's it.
is to look into wine cap mushrooms. There was a guest named Oklahoma Fungi. He's an awesome mycologist. And he recommended that you can grow wine cap mushrooms right in the soil. You make a little substrate layer in your soil, and you can have cannabis plants and edible wine cap mushrooms growing right beneath them. We have a member named Beaker Sneakers who did it. He did it outdoors, and it was awesome. He got this huge wine cap harvest. It's one of the few mushrooms that plays nicely with cannabis, and you can grow it right in your cannabis soil bed.
And it's a soil fungi, so it you just inoculate the soil around. You buy spores or something,
basically,
and then you just inoculate around.
You add a little substrate layer to get a little bit of that, because fungi does feed on lignin, like wood and wood chips and stuff. But you don't need like a big log. You just need like a little substrate layer, and next thing you know, you'll be able to go down to your cannabis grow tent and reach down there and get some mushrooms for dinner. It's really, really cool. I've not seen it done indoors yet. So if you do it Free Range Mister and you do it indoors, please send us a picture. I'm sure it's possible. Just let us know when you do it, because I want to see it done indoors next.
There's got to be people growing psilocybin mushrooms next to their cannabis. If there's
that's the problem. It's cross-contamination is
just doesn't work. Okay.
The microbes from the soil, specifically one called trichoderma, I mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
It's very, very aggressive, and it's like a death sentence to mushroom growers. We love it for cannabis soil. It's great. It keeps pests away. It makes the plants grow happy. But if it gets on a mushroom block, it takes over and it ruins that psilocybin harvest.
All right, good to know. I'm glad I asked that.
Keep them separated.
Wanted to try it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Next question is from the Flower Farm.
Hey, shout out
Jordan is the man.
Flower Farm's the man.
I got a question I've been asked a lot recently. For first-time growers, when is the best time to get seeds popped for outdoor planting? Or should you start them inside? We hear about getting in so many harvests outside, but for a newbie, how can we just get one successful harvest in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this does depend on where you are. So we're going to go over a couple of things here. First of all, we talk about indoors, outdoors. You're much better off starting your plants indoors when they're young and tender and letting them grow up a little bit so they're not so vulnerable, and then moving them outside and hardening them off. And that is what I recommend you do. He asked, should we start them inside? I think that's a good idea. I like starting my seeds around May. Here in Chicagoland. This depends on where you are, but
that's when I start my seeds too. I mentioned with my like loofahs or things that take a long time to grow. That you might even start those earlier though. So that I
gotta have you back on my show. We talk about growing those loofahs. That's really cool. But I digress. You want to get them vegged up a little bit so that you can get them out. You can get them out in June. You want to get your cannabis plants out in June or July, really. That's when people are getting them outdoors so that they can kind of transition in August and really begin flowering in September. And then September and October are kind of your flowering months, moving into November, and then you should harvest before it gets too cold. Now, that being said, there's a million ways to do it. You can get an auto flower runoff really quickly in the beginning. You can get your plants out earlier, weather permitting, and then light deprive them. So it's not 12-12 yet naturally. They're not flowering. But some people take tarps and they cover their greenhouses for an artificial night cycle every day. It's a lot of work.
That is so much work.
It is. It really is. And so those automatic blinds end up saving like a lifetime of labor. But that is called light deprivation. And some people will squeeze off 3 runs outside if they start early enough and do the light dep method. So it's a really, really interesting thing. But like Flower Farm said, I just recommend you getting to one full term harvest. Yeah. And so one thing I wanted to say, also going back to a previous question about light cycles, is don't sleep on supplemental lighting outdoors. This is where you get like a floodlight, like an exterior outdoor Home Depot floodlight. And when your plants are vegging, when you get them outside in June, so like the duration of June and July, you get a floodlight out there. And that really keeps them in veg. Because the problem is, Riley, when it starts getting gray out and there's a couple weeks where it's gray and the sun doesn't come out and then they start to flower and then the sun comes back out and now they're re-vegging before flower time comes and it really messes things up. By keeping that floodlight out there, it really keeps them strong in veg. And then once the time comes, you pull that floodlight away. Now they flip hard into flower.
It's like an immediate change.
There's a lot of people that have to grow this way. The growers on Hawaii that I know all have floodlights because naturally it's 12-12 all year round. So when you fly into the island where my family lives and it's a night flight and you look down out the window, you can see all these lights in the people's backyards who are growers because they've got their floodlights out there, not to keep their plant lit, but to keep it awake so that it veggies long enough.
So that's why it wouldn't matter like what type of bulb was in that light, just as long as there's like some sort of light hitting that plant consistently.
Totally. I've even seen it done with solar lights. For one of our grows, we stuck solar lights, which just come on naturally when it's dark and absorb. Yeah. And they were just enough to keep the plants awake and in veg. And then we took them away and they flipped into flower. So it's really cool what you can do with light manipulation. I hope that answered the question well.
Yeah, and one more small question from me. When I was growing autoflowers this year, somebody mentioned that autos don't like to be transplanted, that you should start the seeds in the container that you're planning on growing them the whole time. Is that true?
I think it's less about don't like to be transplanted, but when auto growers plant their seed in their final container, what they're trying to avoid is the plant getting root bound, which can trigger flowering. So if you start it in a solo cup, and it starts to grow, you can transplant it. I see people transplant autos all the time. Just don't wait too long. Because if you wait too long, it starts to get root bound in there, which is one of the many factors that can say, hey, time to flower, autoflower. Because you can't control when it does. So the being root bound kicks off flowering early. And so some people say, I'm never doing that again. I'm just going to put my seed in the final container and we don't have to worry about that. But I've seen people do it with success. I've seen people top autos with success. Other people say they never top autos. They don't want that stress. So whatever works for you and your genetics, I think it just depends on your situation.
Okay. Thanks for that. Yeah. Okay. Last question from somebody anonymous. Yeah. If we want to answer this, don't feel compelled to if you don't want to.
I'm an open book.
For people living in areas where growing is against the law, so Prohibition states, do you recommend not purchasing equipment from AC Infinity or others, but I know that you're a fan of AC Infinity, or a Canatrol or seeds or anything shipped to your house that involves growing? I know it's not illegal to buy and ship seeds and gear, but would it like trigger some kind of visit or something? Because there's really only one reason to buy all of that.
Yeah, and honestly, I hate that this, what this question really makes me feel is I hate that this listener has to ask this in the first place. It's so silly, Riley. Like with all the things that are going on in the world, all the things that are going on in our country, they talk about safety and how this plant needs to be legalized for safety. Give me a GD break. Take a look at all the things that are harmful to us and our health that they just let fly all the time. It's a joke that we have to tiptoe around this subject of a plant that is non-toxic and one of the most benign psychoactives, if not the most benign psychoactive that humans take.
Dude, it's crazy. It's like I'm giving a keynote presentation tomorrow at a conference, and like I have exactly what you're talking about as one of the slides. It's like it's not about safety, and it shows the stats for alcohol, it shows the stats for tobacco, whether it's cancer risk, whether it's dependence risk, and how many deaths per year. And both alcohol and tobacco are in the hundreds of thousands of deaths per year. And then for cannabis, it says 0 ever. The other two are per year.
And it's just crazy because it creates, when you prohibit it, it creates this whole nother level of danger and unsafety. So if you Google cannabis overdose deaths, what you see is a bunch of like synthetic cannabinoid spice accounts, which is not cannabis. It's a different thing. And they're literally, that's what comes up when you Google cannabis deaths. And that is a result of prohibition. That stuff wouldn't exist without prohibition. The same thing when it comes to safety from this listener. Yeah, I would worry about all that, man. You got a family, not just law enforcement, just other people knowing you're growing. Yeah. You shouldn't have to be afraid of that, but that's the world that we live in, man.
Even the mailman, or mailwoman, like
you don't
just
want
have
someone
no idea.
snitching on you. You don't want someone rolling on you and all that stuff. It's sad that we have to think like this. That being said, there are people who grow their own fruits and vegetables at home with these kits. It's probably less than 5. I mean, it's probably 1% of people who order it is my imagination. But there are people who use these kits. Like you said, there's nothing illegal about them. I don't think that there's any federal agencies watching every AC Infinity order right now. I don't think. But it's like, man, people have been doing this for so long. You're never going to stop it. We actually live in a pretty, like, the number of states that have come online and allowed you to grow is pretty substantial in the past few decades. But people were growing before that, man. And you do it any way you can. I can't answer this question for you. This is something that you all have to kind of think of yourself, and what level of risk are you willing to expose you to in prohibition land. And it just sucks what they did with the hemp bill. Now they're taking away hemp, which you should be able to grow hemp in any state. And they're taking that away now. So just be safe.
What could possibly be the reason for preventing people from growing CBD flower? Like, what is the reason?
Yeah,
that's insane.
It's like you said, though. It's an alcohol lobby move.
Oh yeah, it's so obvious too. Like, they're not even trying to hide it. It's like there's a paper trail from it. It's insane.
Right.
And then, like, what can we do to stop it? Like, nothing, because they're in every politician's pockets. It's so hard with big alcohol and big tobacco. They're just so powerful.
The last thing I'll say, and I never steer into politics, but just a little bit. Here we go. The last thing I will say is, it's highlighted the schism between the states and the federal government, and the reason that is because everybody knows it's bullshit.
Yeah.
No one thinks that cannabis should be a Schedule I drug. No. And when I say nobody, of course there are people, but you can't get Americans to agree on anything. And this is probably one of the most agreed upon subjects is some sort of access, at least for sick people or cancer patients. There's a lot of people who agree that it should not be a Schedule I drug. Everybody knows that that's bullshit. And every dispensary in every state is already operating in violation of federal law. So we'll see what happens with this hemp thing. I don't think there's any putting the cat back in the bag. To this listener, if you can go get it locally so you don't have to worry about the shipping, I can't answer this question for you. I can't tell you whether or not to take a risk, but I will say there's been people who have been doing this for a long time, since before it was legal, and they're not going to stop. Let me put it that way.
And if you got the funds, buy 2 of everything and make a little decoy tent in case somebody comes asking about it, and then grow just vegetables there.
Here's my tomatoes. The other tent is asleep. We can't open that one.
I love that. Okay. Speaking of drugs, I do have one last question for you. And first, I want to thank you so much for sending me a massive bag of coffee beans right after I had little baby. And we've been literally surviving off of that. So thank you so much. And would you mind kind of talking about that specific coffee brand? Because you sent such a beautiful note with it, and it was like a very intentional coffee. And I know you kind of have a deeper connection with coffee too that I'd love to talk about.
I mean, we'll have to save another episode for everything, but yes, absolutely. I could talk for coffee as long as I could talk about cannabis, Riley. I truly think they're the 2 most amazing and incredible and healing plant medicines.
Especially together. Oh my God, coffee and cannabis, they're like a little hug. They're amazing.
The disease prevention is second to none. If you haven't looked into the studies, listener,
I have.
of disease prevention in coffee, all the cancers that it prevents, it's just like cannabis. Neuroprotectant, anti-cancer, all the same stuff. And much like cannabis, it can either be a superfood that's disease preventative if it's farmed right and grown right and processed right, or it can be a health negative. If it's pesticided and grown poorly, it's going to be bad for you and it's going to be bad for the environment. So for a while I did a show. It's still up there. All the old episodes are up there. It's called the Coffee, Health, and Science Podcast. I implore you, go check it out. It's really cool. It's about coffee. It's not about weed. But yeah, I was working with a company called Purity Coffee. Shout out to Purity Coffee. They're effing amazing. It's a great gift this holiday season if you want to grab one. But they just make the world's best coffee. They treat it like we treat flour. They lab test for mold and mycotoxin. They lab test for beneficial compounds and look for the farmers that have the highest beneficial compounds. It's really cool. Long story short, what I'm looking to do is start a THC coffee company. In fact, I started it. I launched it right before all this stuff popped off.
Yeah,
And
speaking of hemp, Bill, like, oh
yeah,
my gosh.
4 days after I announced the company, Riley, to my members,
gosh.
they put a gun
4
to the head of the
days.
industry, and I'm like, okay, but it's not going to stop us, Riley. We'll pivot if we have to. I want to marry these two plant medicines in a way that no one really gives credit to. Everybody loves to smoke with their coffee, but when you drink them together, it's a whole nother experience. It's totally different. And
Is it the same experience as smoking with coffee? It's a different type of experience.
personally, I feel like I'm pretty connected with my body and with what plant medicines do to my body, and I feel a massive difference. It comes from your gut instead of coming from the lungs are so tied to the brain. Look at this high school dropout talking to Dr. Riley Kirk.
No, I'm like,
the lungs are
I
attached
agree.
to the brain. From what I can tell, it's much more body and less cerebral. It comes from the gut. It makes you feel floaty. And the caffeine, the thing about caffeine is it synergizes with other compounds. It makes other compounds more effective, a lot of other compounds. So I think there's really some science to be had if you mix these two things together and put them both directly into the digestive system, because it feels totally different. And now I can be sipping on a coffee and everyone's none the wiser. And edible is over too quickly. I want to be hitting that coffee for a while,
So what's the dosing like? Is there X milligrams per 8-ounce cup of coffee? Or do you weigh out your beans and that's how you know how much?
We have different.
THC?
We're going to have as we are launching shortly here, different strengths per cup. So each bag makes 20 cups. And you can just do the math where it's 5 milligrams per cup, 10 milligrams per cup,
Perfect,
20 milligrams per cup. You can go higher, but you start to taste it. It's so good, you guys. It's the best beans in the world. It's MCT.
What are you tasting? When you say taste it, how are you infusing the THC into the coffee?
So shout out to Potent Ponics. My really good buddy is actually working with me on the THC side, and he sent me a lot of different samples. He's really good at what he does, but the one that by far mixed with coffee the best was MCT oil derived THC, because people already put MCT oil in their coffee and there's already oils in there. So it just, you could never tell by looking at it.
And it's like the best way to extract
THC.
My God. Like MCT and cannabinoids are just like,
it's a marriage. It's a match made in heaven. And I can't say enough good things about this product, you guys. The brand name is Farmer Joe's THC Coffee. My family called me Joe growing up. I am Farmer Joe. It's just a silly little coffee brand. And, we'll be launching soon, and we're not going to let this bill stop us. I don't think it's going to stand, and even if it does, we're going to pivot. We'll find a way to get cannabinoids in your coffee and make the most delicious superfood cannabis beverage you've ever had.
Oh, I love that. I'd also be curious because both THC and caffeine can alter blood flow and the way things move around your body. So, how quickly do you typically feel the product? Like, you kind of feel when caffeine hits your brain, right? When you're like, oh my God, I feel terrible. And then you take your coffee and you're like, you know what? Life's not that bad. Like, is that pretty similar
7
timeline?
minutes. It is
7
literally,
minutes.
it must synergize with it somehow, because 4 to 7 minutes, I mean, even less sometimes, it's just as fast as caffeine hits you, like you said. And by 7 minutes in, you're feeling buzzed up, and it comes down faster too. The reason I don't like an edible is because you eat it. It's like, oh, okay, gummy's gone. Experience is over. Now you have to wait for it to kick in. And then once it's kicked in, you could be on a ride for hours. Whereas with the cannabis coffee, you feel it almost right away. And then for me as a heavier user, 45 minutes later, when I start to come down from the caffeine, that's when I start to come down from the cannabis too. It's like really, really smooth ride. I can't wait to get you some. We're going to get you some before
I can't wait
it's
to
illegal.
try it. So just real quick, you could either essentially chug your coffee and then kind of feel those effects in a more like even dome, or you could sip your coffee, like if you're a slow sipper, or even an iced coffee, and like sip it for a long time, and now you have this like really beautiful long
now
like,
you're
journey.
getting it, and you don't have to worry about overdosing as easily because you're feeling it as it comes on, like smoking. It's just great. It's a great consumption method. I want to make cannabis coffee one of the most popular beverages in the world. I think it's the best way to drink cannabis, and soon the website will be live and you can see for yourself.
Dude, you know what would be so cool is like, you know, the canned coffee or like Starbucks type drinks that they have in the cooler at gas stations.
That's where we're headed.
Oh my god.
That's where we're headed. We got to start, because bottling is a whole thing, but we got to start with, we're going to have instant and we're going to have grounds. So you got instant for on the go, we got grounds for at home, and our third SKU, our third product is going to be cold brew cans. So
yeah,
I got you, Riley.
I'll
send some to you. Use code Riley at checkout today.
Not right now, but when it's out there, absolutely. I can't wait. Okay, well, I'm so amped for you. That's like the coolest product ever. I'm so excited.
Cheers.
And yeah, one way or another, this hemp bill, one thing about the cannabis industry is we know how to problem solve. We know how to get things done, and I'm confident that will happen.
I like your optimism. What else can we be aside from optimistic? That's how I feel.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Love that. Thanks for coming on and answering my questions and all of our community questions. You're such a wealth of knowledge and so good at explaining things. So I really, really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much. I feel the exact same way. It's really easy coming on here. I'm just a guy who's done a lot of shows and absorbed a lot of knowledge from other people. And I encourage everyone else to do the same. We've got Growcast.com. You can find the podcast. You can find the community. I help growers one-on-one every day in the community. If you're a grower and you need help, come and see us. If you want to come join a community where you can trade and meet people and come to the meetups, and we do parties and Discord hangouts and everything, check it out. It's growcast.com/membership. And Riley, I'd love to have you back on the show. You are an awesome guest on my show, so I'd like to put you on the spot right now and invite you back to Growcast anytime. It's an open door policy for you.
Oh, of course. I'd love to come back as long as it's once my husband's home to help watch the baby.
Exactly. Well, I mean, listen, yeah, bring the baby on the pod. We'll figure it all out.
You don't want the baby on the pod.
Just kidding. Fantastic. Right. Thank you. I appreciate you, Riley.
Cool. Thank you, Jordan. Mad love. And I'm sure we'll talk to you next growing season when people have even more questions.
Sounds great. Happy growing, everybody. Peace.